Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 37 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Dratnos. I'm joined by Tettles.
Hello, I guess I am joining Dratnos this week on the Titanforge podcast.
And Trell.
Hello, I'm joining Dratnos and Tettles on the Titanforge podcast.
Hello, I'm great. It's great to be joined by both of you here. So, okay.
I think that's an X on the bingo sheet for cringy intro.
I think that we've hit that bingo square for all 37 episodes so far. We are doing it. All right. Okay, so this week we are going to talk about, we've got a couple of things. We're going to talk about the class balance changes that we saw coming out a couple days ago that they're not yet in the game, but we have the announcement. They'll be in with some hot fixes. And we'll be talking about the difference to our kind of main topic, our main discussion topic this week, is the different playstyle of the 6 different tank specs. Mostly in Mythic Plus, but we'll also cover Raid a little bit. Raid's a little bit less interesting than Mythic Plus in this way, but definitely still will be something we touch on. I think there's a lot more difference to how the tanks play in Mythic Plus than there is in Raid, though. So yeah, that's what we'll talk about. Hi, Nerf. Give him a wave. Okay, so let's talk about our social media presence. We are on Twitter at TitanforgeWow, where you can follow us and ask us questions that we will answer on the show. You can also ask us questions in our Discord. And if you're interested in supporting the show, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Titanforge, where you can help pay us money. People who are doing that are... What, Tuttles?
Nothing. Go.
All right.
The deal.
People who are doing that are Ahar of US Proudmore, Paul of US Proudmore, King of Skills, VTech XD, Rock, Zuko, Jaw, Uncle Please Invite, Khalifa D Pog, Drunk Swede from Legion of Lemmings Argent Dawn EU, Shirtless Tettles, Actually Tootsie, Heltari, Ishiyu, Blue of Emerald Dream, Chromed, Seraphicus, Trekkie, The Marsh Hare, Regulus, Never Nude, Grizzjam. Actually, I thought I saw a new one as well, but I didn't double check, so we may have a new one in there that we didn't chat out this week. I'll go through and update this whole list, make sure it's all correct for next show.
No, Chad, we do not have an OnlyFans. Maybe sometime next year.
Are you trying to get down like that?
Just a future hopeful thing, Just to put it out there.
If you want to be in charge,
thing? I will leave that up to Trell to manage a Titanforge OnlyFans.
Some content creators have had really good success with OnlyFans. I don't know why, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah, Trell will be the runner of our Titanforge OnlyFans. So any questions about that, please direct to him directly. Feel free to DM him on Discord or whatever. He loves to get those. Okay, so let's start with
just be pictures of Tettles, though.
Yeah.
You want to talk about moving on?
Well, you want to talk about Trell's MDI team first?
Sure. So we have an MDI team announcement. We actually have a couple of MDI team announcements coming out this week. But let's start with Trell's. Trell, why don't you tell us who you're going to play the MDI with?
Well, we decided to name the team Inertia to keep it nice and neutral. We wanted to do a funny name again, like All Girls Welcome, since last time it was No Girls Allowed. But we're going to keep it kind of neutral and straightforward this time. It was going to be Nerf on the team, but he had a big announcement with his wife yesterday on Twitter where they announced that they're having a baby. So he'd have to miss the LAN, and he's just going to coach the team instead. So the roster is myself, Undead, Drastic, and Fu, and Leo. I also told Leo.
Nerf is pregnant?
Yeah, Nerf is pregnant.
Yeah. Congratulations. Nerf. So yeah, that's Trell's MDI team, Inertia. Pretty exciting team there.
Yeah, we'll be playing in KSM, and we're really excited to get on Tournament Realm, I think, starting on March 3rd, if I remember right, March 2nd.
I also will be on the Tournament Realm, competing in Keystone Masters, as part of a team called Account Wide Essences, so be on the lookout for that.
Who's that with?
Corey May, Jacob, Twisted, and Facts.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah.
We actually considered naming ourselves that. I bet a lot of teams want that name just to put it out there for this.
The thing is, everybody's gonna root for you if you're named Account Wide Essences, right? There's no 100%. way. All right. In addition to that, we also have an announcement of a team that you may be familiar with called Method NA. So Method NA, let's see if I can find this announcement. I don't know if I can. They are, of course, still with J.B. Yeah, okay, found him.
Perfect.
Yeah, there it is. Dude, it's so hard to find tweets on the fly. All right, I got it though. Method NA has had the monumental task of replacing Nerf Tank this season, but they've got their guy. They have Lighty moving to tank, and then they have joining the roster is Lip from Complexity Limit, who played Rat Pally on their kill of N'Zoth, and is now joining up this roster. He's, I think, a pretty competent multi-classer, so I would expect to see him on a lot of different stuff in the MDI, whatever they need. And then, yeah, Yoda.
I hope he pulls out that rat at some point in the dungeons. Maybe there'll be a spot where he can find a good use for it, you know?
I think I have a high suspicion that he probably will not.
I don't know,
you
man.
Never know. Maybe there's a map that they didn't practice and decide to go to the last boss or something.
He plays maybe.
That's true. Yeah, Method EU played like Holy Priest and Resto Shaman in the last MDI, so anything could happen. If they do a troll map again, even if they don't do a troll map, I don't think Red is that far behind, especially in like in good corruptions. I don't know.
Yeah, and like regular polls, I think it's really good. Like live polls, it's really good.
Yeah, I could see it.
For live stuff, Red is actually incredible, but that doesn't always translate that well.
I don't know. Vision is an essence that scales really well with neck levels, so that's something that's going nice for that spec compared to others.
I have a high suspicion that all the trash is going to die in like 20 seconds every single pack.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's kind of a worry about this season's MDI is that player damage has scaled up immensely with corruption, but player survivability really hasn't very much. So, you know, a 17 key might be just as lethal as it used to be, but the pack is going to die in half the time, and that's definitely a worry.
Even on live, like stuff on 22s is dying in like 30 seconds. Some major fortified pulls, like on 18s, I feel like it's just going to last 10 seconds sometimes. It's going to be nuts.
Yeah, it's definitely a spooky thing. We'll have to see exactly how it plays out, because the MDI's kind of already been about stuff melting really quickly, and now that'll maybe be even more sketchy. Like stuff will still have to melt quickly, but you know the being hit by one ability might just kill you, depending on what key level they choose.
They try to use the eye test in terms of what key level is going to be not too arduous yet. Stuff won't die instantly, and that has like whenever you're reaching that point now, I don't even know where you would put that, like a 20, but at a 20 people can just die to random stuff too. And it's like well, this is rough.
Like, let's say it's 18s and stuff is for sure going to die in 20 seconds. That's kind of scary because that means you can pull pretty much anything as long as Way the Crane stays up in those 15 to 20 seconds. And Unholy DKs get to kill the trash, because that means you could pull like a million mobs, and it just increases the healing done by the party and the damage done by the party the more you pull. So it's going to be really scary, I think, some of these pulls.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something to look out for. One thing, though, that we were also kind of looking out for, I guess I was more surprised by this than actually looking out for it, was class balance changes. I kind of thought that the ship had sailed on this. I thought there was not going to be any changes to classes before pre-patch. For Shadowlands, but Blizzard Entertainment has surprised us here, and they've come out with a set of buffs to classes in PvE. There were some PvP nerfs, but for PvE, it's all buffs. Resto Druid getting some mana cost buffs on Rejuve and Efflo, and some healing buffs to Trank, with the goal being to improve their raid healing without making them too OP in dungeons or arenas. Definitely interesting, though. I think this will certainly help them in Mythic Plus as well. Where they were already quite good.
No, that's definitely. I think that's like trying to keep them at the current rate that they already were in Mythic Plus.
Yeah, but Efflo going down that much mana cost and Rejuve going down. I mean, that's going to help.
Like helps their mana for sure. Jam is running out of mana in a couple spots this week, and honestly, the more buffs so that I can live Shadow of Zul, the better on live, because that thing does way too much damage on 22 fort, and any buff to my healer I will take. That would be great.
Marksmanship Hunter, Windwalker Monk, Frost Mage, Demonology Warlock all also received a 5% damage buff. and Enhancement Shaman got a 3% damage buff, which Enhancement Shaman actually there already is one of them at the top of the Raider IO scoreboards right now. So that person must be very happy to see a buff coming to their class.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
He completed a 24 junkyard or some shit.
Okay, to be fair, 24 junkyard is based solely on the fact that zap damage scales with key level, so just those zap bots solo the whole dungeon for you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But still, it's cool to see the enhanced shaman on the world first leaderboard.
Yeah, definitely awesome to see that up there. Slapping the meters. Windwalker is another spec where this is a spec that was already not bad in Mythic Plus. Definitely needed this buff for raid. I don't.
They do negative damage in raid right now.
Yeah, that's definitely the problem for the spec is that all their damage like cleaves pretty effectively, but it's not doing very much damage to that primary target. Then Marksmanship and Frost Mage are two very and Demonology actually are all just outshone by other specs on those classes. I think they will continue to be as well in both Raid and Mythic Plus. I think you're still not going to see people in very high level groups choosing those specs, but the people who do like those specs are now going to be less bad off for having chosen them, and that's a good thing.
I'm kind of surprised that Sin Rogue didn't catch a buff somehow, if Enhancement did.
Yeah, I think rogue buffs are
not sub or outlaw, but I'm surprised that Assassination didn't catch a buff because that's like
Sin's already being played though, right? Like it wasn't Sin played on World First and Azoth?
Yeah, I mean, are you buffing purely based off player participation?
I think they're buffing purely on single target, right?
Well, they're buffing based off raid damage.
Right, yeah. So let's talk about what we think they're basing the class balance off of. So this is Warcraft logs, damage all bosses mythic over the last 2 weeks since the Echoing Void nerf. And if you look at the specs that they buffed, we've got Marksmanship here, the bottom spec, Windwalker third from the bottom, Frostmage fourth from the bottom, and then Demonology actually in the middle of the pack, as is Enhancement. All still well below the top level here. And of course, there's just this Fire Mage abomination sitting at the top of this graph.
How did they not? How did
they
Fire not catch a nerf? Like, I don't understand how they didn't get their damage nerfed by 5%.
Yeah, I think the thing about nerfs in the middle of most guilds' progression is that's a lot more impactful and that's a lot more damaging to a guild than a buff can ever be, right?
Okay. How did they not catch a 5% nerf before the patch?
Yeah, that's a huge question mark to me as well. I was expecting a Fire Mage nerf, I would have bet money on it.
Like heroically, right?
Yeah. It's so bananas, and it's like it's good on single target, and then just ads get involved, and it's insane. For free.
I mean, well, yeah. Part of the problem too with Fire Mage is like a 5% damage nerf wouldn't even solve the issues of what they're facing. Part of the problem is that Ignite is just massively overloaded right now, and they have so many resources to be able to buff up that Ignite, whether it's Mastery % Corruption, Memory of Lucid Dreams, just so much random stuff to be able to buff up that Ignite. And everything in Raid is already cleave based.
Yeah.
Like the best damage profile for Raid is something that is efficient cleave. So that's where your Fire Mage and your Havoc Demon Hunters are excelling. So I'm kind of surprised that neither of those got a nerf, but
yeah,
before the tier.
Right. Again, we're not really expecting nerfs to come in the middle of progression, at least unless something is really OP. I think they try and stay away from that for the most part. But yeah, this is an interesting thing to balance class changes on. I think it does make sense to buff up specs like Marksmanship and Windwalker for Raid. I do worry about
some of the lesser off ones.
Yeah, I worry about buffing. Like, it's not like Windwalker was bad in PvP and Mythic Plus though. Like, I don't know, 5% across the board is less than 5% buffed their overall damage, of course, because it's not going to affect corruption and everything. So these buffs are smaller than 5% or 3% or whatever.
No. It's smaller than that because that's not how the aura scales. So if they have a negative 29% aura modifier, then it will be changed. And say they get a 5% buff, it'll be changed to a negative 24% aura modifier. That's not a 5% buff. That is a 4-point-something% buff.
No classes right now have an aura modifier. That all gets washed away every full patch.
No, everybody has an aura modifier still. I'm 100% sure.
They bake it in each patch though. Each patch
Windwalkers Windwalker's aura modifier was negative 29%, and it got changed to 24, so it was like only a 4.5% buff.
Okay, fair enough.
Either one of you could be right.
You certainly could be right. I thought that they removed the aura modifier, like that the aura modifiers got just changed to they just changed the base values every patch based on the aura modifier, but I could be wrong, or they could have not done that with 8.3. All right, let's talk about some other changes that are upcoming. We have some horrific visions of N'Zoth changes for upgrading your cloak. That first of all, coalescing visions will now drop in higher numbers from assaults and daily quests starting next week. Starting next week, we're having coalescing visions dropping in higher numbers. We don't know how much these higher numbers are, but that could be nice. If it's a small buff, then it won't really be impactful. The unique 5 inventory cap on Vessel of Horrific Visions has been removed, allowing you to carry as many vessels as you like. Good, although why don't these stack?
Yeah, please stack. My inventory is so full all the time.
Yeah.
Don't you have to do? You have to do 9 visions like the last week for your biggest cape upgrade.
Right.
Like, I don't know what their expectation was for you to be able to get 9 like in your bags and shit.
Well, you don't get 9 in your bags. Yeah.
You can have, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could only have 5 at once. Like, how the hell are you supposed to have 9?
Well, you could have 5 vessels, 2.5 vessels in currency, and you could carry 1 chest of each type as well. So you could pretty easily still do that on the first day, but you would have had to have started saving up really this week.
Dude said a chest of each type.
And then up to 4 torn pages of Fear and Flesh quest items can now drop in Horrific Visions. Was a maximum of 2. So that's really nice. This won't matter for people that already are up to date on your cloak, because this quest item is no longer the one that matters starting on rank 12, which is what we'll get next week. Next week it's a new book that you get from Lost Areas. But for people that are behind a little bit, this is a good change. And if you or your alts are behind right now, you should probably not do any Horrific Visions until this change gets implemented. Because this will mean that you can save some vessels. You can do it in half as many vessels once this change comes in.
Quick question.
Stuff for my alts.
You only need 1 Horrific Vision next week, correct?
Yes, next week you need to do 1 Horrific Vision and complete a lost area, not a corrupted area,
That's
a lost area only. And that will upgrade that'll get you your rank 12.
Wait, so we had to do 4 this week, and we have to do 1 next week?
5 next. We have to do 5 the week after, I believe.
It's 1, 3, 6, 9 are the next
3. Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's the ramp up that we're looking at over the next couple weeks. So what that means is save your vessels. Start it like so you're going to want a lot of vessels for that the week where you need 6 and the week where you need 9. In order to come out of the week where you need 6 with any vessels saved for that week when you need 9, you need to have come into that week with some saved as well. Now, there are incentives to do your Horrific Visions like more than 1 per week, right? For more gear, especially if you're doing 5 mass clears, you can maybe do a couple of runs in a week. But yeah, it's a good idea. Again, you can save more than 5. First of all, you can save more than 5 because the unique 5 requirement's going away, but even then, you can also save currency or caches to save up to like 9 in your bags, even in the game right now. Okay, so that's the Horrific Vision changes. I'm pretty excited about those. Tettles, do you have any thoughts on them?
I think being able to run more Horrific Visions is definitely better. I think Horrific Visions are seen as a very good thing in the game, and a lot of players are having significant amounts of fun, especially since people are able to do these 5 mass clears now. Pretty good change overall. Pretty happy with that. We're also going to see a pretty big damage gain next week too, right? Because of the cape.
Yeah, so next you should focus on getting that as your first priority next week, because that cape upgrade is going to come with a huge damage proc. It's like 3,500 primary stat with 40% uptime. So it's basically like font of power, just random fonts of power. That is, it's like a 5% damage increase for a lot of specs. So
Travis, what if 30% of your class's damage are procs that aren't related to intellect at all?
Good point. Good point. Yeah. Then it's still very good. Is the thing.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Even for specs like Fire Mage that really don't like intellect all that much, this is a pretty big gain.
Is there how many specs out there even like main stat as their best stat right now? I feel like none of my specs like main stat at all, and that's like one of the devs' biggest things is they wanted eye level to matter, and I don't think a single spec I play really wants agility or strength as their main stat. Like you just want crit or burn.
The answer is 0. None of them have main stat as their top. Some of the agility wearers have main stat pretty high, like Rogue and Demon Hunter, I think, enjoy main stat.
Rogue
but
is
even
medium.
then, they're not even, none of them eat feasts. Like, that's the
Windwalker.
point.
Yeah.
There are so few classes that eat feasts. I think it's like, I think it may be Elemental Shaman and like that's it.
People talk about Windwalker scaling badly, or I say that Windwalker scales badly. Part of the way you can tell Windwalker scales badly is that agility is a good stat for them. If primary stat's good for you, that means that your class's scaling sucks. Like
That's true. That's
you're just getting every other class that is scaling off secondary stats is going to own you in terms of late patch scaling, if that's true. So yeah, let's move on to our tip of the week segment. My tip of the week this week is that there are some food items you might want for your horrific visions. So Kbab, that's K''BAB, is a sanity restore food that you have to eat for 10 seconds to restore your sanity, and it restores 100 sanity. This is going to get more and more efficient as our cloak gets better, because 100 sanity is going to represent more and more time. So that's really a nice thing to have access to, especially if you're eating it while RP is happening, or when you're in the like areas that are not you're not draining huge amounts of sanity. So you can eat them like in Stormwind, you can eat it right before going into either of the lost areas, and that's a pretty efficient time to eat that. In Orgrimmar, you can eat it like when mini bosses are doing their RP or whatever. You do have to be a little bit careful if you're playing the mask that spawns enemies below 50% health. Those can spawn and come in, or below 50% sanity. Those can spawn and come get you in combat, so do have to be careful of that. The other two food items I like using are Ghastly Goulash, which is 2% health restored per second. That's a huge tankiness increase. When I play like Enhancement Shaman in Horrific Visions, that goes a huge way towards making you able to tank 10 mobs at once. Like that'll restore many health bars over the course of the Horrific Vision. So big value there. Or if you're playing a tank, like a Blood Death Knight or whatever, then I like playing Baked Void Fin instead, which is 20% movement speed. Yeah,
me too.
You can also play a food that reduces the duration of CCs on you, but I think that is the least valuable one.
So for those who are not intelligent, where do you obtain these things? Because I actually just don't know where
the
those
auction
come.
house.
The auction house is the best place. Yeah, they are new cooking recipes that you get this like cookbook from in the same way that you get the Void Focus recipes.
Okay.
And they're cooked with questionable meat, which is the new meat that you're finding on stuff.
But you would advise me to just buy them from the auction house?
That's what I do.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can make
Great. I
that
didn't want to really. I was worrying about having to actually cook these items myself.
In my life, I've never cooked an actual item. I always just use the auction house. If people, the only time I've ever cooked something is if somebody's like trying to be clever and pricing things at like 900 gold on the auction house and trying to scam me, and then I'll learn how to cook it.
More true to your real life as well?
I was gonna say that.
Very much so. Yes. Yeah. The auction house is just the Uber Eats of WoW. Yeah. Actually, that's with the auction house mount as well. It's as convenient too. That's like just opening up your phone and ordering some food. Trell, what's your tip of the week?
All right, my tip is, the big slimes in Junkyard. There's 3 of them to spawn Gunker, the boss in the south area. Those slime puddles they do, it's called Consuming Slime. You can spell reflect it by walking into it, and then once you spell reflect it, if you stay within the poison puddle, it won't ever tick on you again, and it hits the mob for like 1.5 million to 2 million, depending on key. So just another really broken spell reflect for warrior going into this patch. And also, you could do that as a class with a disease dispel, like if you're a Windwalker. You can walk into the puddle, instantly dispel yourself, and just stay in the puddle and not have to worry about it ever again. Like you can just chill there and hit the mob.
Yeah, it's a weird ability for sure. That's what I do as well, though. You just run in and you can AMS the first, like, basically when you have handled it one time, it will not keep trying to reapply to you, which is really great.
Credit to Nerf for telling me that one.
Shout out Nerf. That's yeah.
True.
That's a really it'll like solo those things though. You can just not really focus on damaging them at all, and they will just die to reflect.
So Trell and I were in the same run in the junkyard whenever Nerf told Trell this, and as soon as it happened, the boss got this big ass absorb on him, like the biggest absorb I've ever seen, and then he started melting, and I'm just like, this is the most overpowered ass spell reflect I've ever seen. It is more insane than the Cyclone Strike getting spell reflected and the Witches from Heartsbane Triad. It's more insane than both of them. I don't get it.
I think Cyclone Strike still beats it out a little bit. Like, that takes the boss's health off by 30%, but still, it's pretty damn big.
Okay, imagine if you didn't have shock bots then.
Yeah, well, okay.
if you don't have 5 shock bots, then that spell reflect probably kills that mob in 2 spell reflects. It may be equally as good as the Guardian Elemental one.
Yeah, it's very, very, very OP. And if you're playing with that weak aura that adds spell reflect to details, then your warrior will be top damage on those pulls and maybe the dungeon.
Yeah, yeah. Nerf and I both did 90k overall damage and a couple junkyard runs this week as Prot Warrior, and our DPS friends are sitting at like 100 to 120k overall. It was pretty close because of those two things, Zap and spell reflect.
Yeah.
Nerf was preparing to flame me if I didn't beat you, Trell, but luckily enough, I came through and won somehow.
Yeah, you got me by a little bit.
All right, Tettles, you have a clip of the week for us this week. This is,
yes, I do.
This is a weak aura that you've made. All right, here it is.
I didn't make it. Okay, so let it be known that I didn't make this. I found the template for this online, and then I repurposed it.
All right, here it is. Hello, everybody. My name is Dratnos, and today I'm making a tier list. Hello, everybody. That's a little.
I
weak aura
love
you
those
made.
weak auras. The one of THD on preheats.
Yeah,
Tweet was really good too. That shit's so funny.
You should pull up the Wago that I have right there.
So here's it's this thing from Beyond that is a template that has like Ian Hazacostas on these things from Beyond, and you can like that one has a huge amount of different Ian faces that it chooses between, but you can always go into like you can always mess with this weak aura and change the icons yourself. In our Titanforge podcast Discord, all of the source materials are there if you want to make Tettles, if you want to make the same one Tettles did with my face and stuff. Yeah. But feel free to be creative, you know? You can come up with all kinds of good ones.
As to how that actually ends up working out is you need to make sure that it's like a 32 by 32 or a 64 by 64 icon. And then you need to make a folder that's named icons, and then you have to like relink your directory. And then if you want something that has sound, you need to make like a sounds directory in your interface folder and add a .mp3 file. I think the file extension for these is .tga. I think that's the only file type that's supported by WoW. Currently there's no like PNG or JPEG support for some reason. I don't understand. But you can use .mp3 for sound support. It took me a while to be able to figure out how it all ended up working, but then eventually I got it.
Basically, this is one of those weak auras that's going to take you 30 minutes to figure out how to set up, but it may be worth it for you. Okay, so that's the tips of the week and clip of the week. Let's move on to our main topic, which is a discussion of tank playstyles. Again, with a Mythic Plus focus, but we'll talk a little bit about Raid. So there are kind of, before we start talking about specific classes, there are kind of a few things that are true of every tank, and then a few areas where they differentiate themselves, right? For instance, I'd say like being proactive versus being reactive for incoming damage is kind of a thing that differentiates tanks. You know, you can identify a proactive tank by someone that needs to have demon spikes up before they get hit or whatever, and a reactive tank is someone who death strikes after they get hit. And those are kind of the two fundamentally different ways of handling incoming damage, right?
I think each tank is somewhere on that spectrum. Like, Prot Warrior is probably the most proactive tank, where you have hardly anything you can do to heal yourself after the damage, but you have tons of mitigation before the damage. Whereas Demon Hunter is somewhere in the middle, where they have demon spikes, but they also have a lot of self-healing after the damage. And then you got Blood Decay on the other end, where it's only reactive healing and like hardly any initial mitigation.
Yeah, so that's kind of an axis that if you kind of the point of this show is if you're somebody who's trying to figure out which tank you might want to play, we're gonna try and help give you some tools to think about how the different tanks work and which playstyle sounds better to you. For instance, another thing is that some classes their mitigation's just always up, and some classes it's only up some of the time. And a huge part of the gameplay for those classes is figuring out where you want your mitigation up and what to do when it is inevitably down. So specs like Brewmaster, right, just always have Ironskin Brew up, and they're just always kind of fairly tanky. But they do still need to kite sometimes even with Ironskin Brew up. Whereas specs like Vengeance Demon Hunter, they basically never have to kite when their Demon Spikes are up. But if their Demon Spikes are down, they are very, very squishy. And so...
Well, I don't even know.
Outside of meta,
Vengeance.
right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. If they don't have Demon Spikes or meta up, then they're squishy.
Yeah.
It's a pretty wide range of how vulnerable they are. They're like super tanky in meta, pretty tanky with Demon Spikes, dead without either. They're just on the ground if nothing's up and something's
correct.
Okay, so let's talk about Warrior as our first one. We'll go through these in kind of an arbitrary order, I guess. Warrior though is kind of that is the class that you're going to see the most in the MDI. It's the class you'll see most from like live key pushing. If you're tuned into streams like that, it's Trell. You're playing that this season. Although maybe DPS Warrior some as well when you can find somebody else to tank. Yeah.
What poor fool are you conning into tanking?
Cry.
Yeah.
That poor fool.
Yeah, Cry's been a good sport. I got pretty frustrated last week. Wanted DPS for a while.
Let's talk about the Warrior kind of playstyle. If this is something that might be interesting to you. So I guess one thing about the kind of core of the rotation is generating and spending rage, right?
Yeah, you pretty much use Shield Slam and Thunderclap to generate, which is kind of weird for a spec because both of those abilities are also your highest damage abilities as Prot Warrior. It's usually not like that. Usually your spenders do a lot more damage and also give you mitigation, but this is kind of backwards for some things intuitively. So you spam Shield Slam on single target as much as you can and Thunderclap on AoE as much as you can. In Avatar, you want to Thunderclap every other global anyway, but the goal is to fill up your rage and keep it going so that you get your cooldowns back as fast as possible with the talent Anger Management, which is a key to Prot Warrior.
Yeah, so your goal with Anger Management is to that reduces all of your like big cooldowns CD, even Demoralizing Shout, so you can have really short effective cooldowns on stuff like Last Stand. And in your Last Stand, you talent Bolster, right, so that you're blocking 100% of attacks while you're last standing, and so you can use that to bridge the gaps in your shield block uptime.
Yeah, and because there's shield block uptime, aren't a lot of Prot Warriors playing Memory of Lucid Dreams now?
Yeah,
lately as well, just because
play the major,
yeah, they get so much rage from Anger Management that they're able to mitigate those lapses in downtime and just no longer have them, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of options. Like the goal is to keep as much shield block or just block uptime as much as possible, with Last Stand being fill in the gaps, like we said. And some things allow you to do that better. Like Lucid Dreams Major gives you a shitload more rage while you have it active, and you can get your cooldowns back probably like 30% faster because of that. And I've tried it out, and I think it's really good. However, you can use a couple other things to fill those gaps too, like your Healer's External while your shield block's down for 3 seconds. The N'Zoth Trinket is really strong for shield block downtime.
Especially in Raid. Like in Raid, that thing is bananas, the N'Zoth Trinket. It's like if you get a weak aura that just tracks how much actual size of that absorb is on you in Ny'alotha, it's like 0.5 mil or something on a 1 minute cooldown. Outside of Ny'alotha, it's only like 250k, but still, it's very, 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 very strong. So, would recommend that. Yeah.
In reality, I think Prot Warrior with good gameplay has only 3 to 4 second downtime periods of time without shield block, and so you only get 3 or 4 of those, and then you'll have Last Stand up again. And so those little windows are what you need to worry about as Prot Warrior. So what I'd recommend is just having something to fill there. And a lot of people, instead of taking Lucid Dreams now, are running Azeroth's Undying Gift. because of the new scaling this season, everything hits you so hard, and just having that extra 40% DR for little moments like that is really nice, and sometimes required.
People are playing Azeroth's Undying Gift Major.
Yeah, they are, and high keys at least.
That seems that's weird because we didn't see anybody play that last season, right?
Yeah, the scaling didn't really require it. Like if you dropped shield block for a few seconds, you'd live almost any situation without having to get out of melee completely. And you could also kite as well. But this season, with how hard boss abilities hit, like Shadow Azul, the bleed from Razan and Ataldazar, the bursting stacks from the Sards, like having that 40% DR on a 4-second duration is pretty strong.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, a good point is that that's also effective against the Spirit Breaker, right? You can use it against 2 total Spirit Breakers while you're fighting that thing.
Yeah, that too.
How is Prot Warrior versus Spirit Breaker?
It's not bad at all now. Like after the 2 nerfs to Spirit Breaker, I'm really not worried about it. I can eat one unmitigated at full health on a 23 and survive, which is crazy because on PTR, that would have killed me on a 17. It's been nerfed quite a bit.
Yeah, so I guess kind of one of the things about the playstyle for Warrior is that it's really all about like managing your shield block and knowing when it's up. And there's kind of a weird thing where you don't press it while you're last standing. Like that's a really, really bad thing to do is to press shield block while you're last standing. So for some players, I think I think some players wouldn't really enjoy that play style. So make sure that's something that you are interested in doing if you're thinking of rolling up a Warrior.
Well, that's only if you have bolster talent,
which you almost always do in Mythic Plus.
Yes, you should definitely have bolster talented.
Yeah. Okay. One of the big things though that is good about this class is that it does a huge amount of damage, right? Like just thunderclaps and everything, massive damage.
If you want to really piss off your DPS friends, go Prot Warrior and go do a Temple of Sithralis. They will get very upset and try to prevent your spell reflex.
Yeah, they can't win. They can't win.
Well, that's only if they have that add-on that shows damage. Okay, so honestly, I'm uninstalling the details spell reflect damage just to make myself feel better. Thanks.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, Prot Warrior, very good tank against Skittish. So there are kind of 3 challenging tank affixes that you've identified in this list here, Trell. Skittish, right. Bursting, and Necrotic. Which of those are easy and which are hard for Prot Warriors?
Prot Warrior Skittish is basically non-existent. The way Prot Warrior's damage profile breaks down is that you have a Thunderclap every other global, which hits in a really wide radius with the normal Prot Warrior talents. And so threat is just not hard. Like even on a spread pull where mobs are coming at you from many directions, you can easily get threat as long as you have Avatar running, which you should on the beginning of most pulls. Whereas other tanks only have AoE damage like once every 6 seconds, like Brewmaster has Keg Smash, which we'll talk about later, comes around every 6-7 seconds, and that's it. You don't really have major AoE threat outside of that.
Yeah. How about Bursting and Necrotic?
Bursting, Prot Warrior is pretty bad against Bursting. Like you can plan your cooldowns solely for Bursting, but if you do that, that means you're not going to be able to use them on the pulls at all. And you also have more health than Brewmaster, although it's not really the highest health tank. Like it's kind of in the middle ground, I think. On the lower end, actually, these days.
Yeah.
Prot Warriors. Brewmaster has the lowest health, and then Prot Warrior the second lowest health. So Bursting doesn't hit them as hard, but they also just don't have good mitigation.
Wait, I thought Prot Pally had the lowest health.
Right. Yeah, they have very low health as well.
Do they? Okay. I haven't played my Paladin in a while.
And then Necrotic is an interesting one because Warriors. So Necrotic is easier for classes that parry or dodge a lot, right? Especially on single target.
Warrior have constant sources of mobility, where Warrior just has heroic lead.
Well, okay, so it's kind of weird. Like on paper, Prot Warrior is really bad against Necrotic, right? Because they can't dodge or parry it that much. They just get stacks really quickly. But in reality, Prot Warrior takes the littlest amount of damage to the face with proper gameplay. And so you can actually just go to like 50 Necrotic stacks in most pulls. If there's no magic damage, I got to clarify that. And you'd just be okay because you won't actually lose health. You'll just sit there at full health. Even though you can't take healing, you're fine. Whereas Brewmaster in a lot of those pulls, you have to kite at like 20 stacks because your health is just getting destroyed by the damage from the dungeon.
Yeah. On single target Necrotic, I'd say Warrior is one of the, like that's on boss fights, Necrotic Tyrannical type situations, that can be a scary time to be a Prot Warrior.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas some classes have a pretty easy time on single target. AoE necrotic, though, yeah, I'd say warrior very good, especially because like one shockwave and heroic leap away, and you can usually reset, and you don't need to do that more than once per pull usually.
Absolutely, but yeah, you're right. On bosses, you'd have to have some melee DPS or a healer or ranged with the taunt like Boomkin could take the boss off you for a second if you have one parry, and then necrotic stacks at like 3 seconds left, and then they taunt it, and then you taunt back when the boss almost reaches them, something like that.
Do you think Necrotic should be set up like this where it needs group coordination to be able to help reset?
I don't think so. It requires a ton of like 1 second communication to do that on a boss like Full Call, and I don't think that's okay for pugs. How can you expect the whole group to really figure that out on a high key without communication? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of fine with the like play of Necrotic in a high key. I'm kind of I think it's kind of cool, but I do think it is a little bit silly to ask that of like everybody.
Yeah, no, I definitely do agree with that.
And I don't like the disparity in which classes can handle it well and which can't.
That actually reminds me, I was in a pug a couple weeks ago as a DPS, and I taunted off the tank as my warrior. I leapt away and taunted when he had like 4 seconds left on his necrotic on a boss, and he's like about to die. And the moment I taunted, he taunted back because he just didn't know I was actually going to save him, and he probably hadn't had anyone do that for him before. And I was like, no, and then he just died right after the. I was trying to save you, man.
A lot of tanks do that, right? Like if they ever don't have threat, they just taunt, right? And
right, it's in the nature. Like you have to get threat. That's your job.
It's not always.
I love it whenever my tanks just taunt instantly off my trees, and I'm just like, yeah, sure, do whatever you want, man.
So warrior we expect to be the top like pushing and MDI tank this season. It's already the one that's at the top of all the Raider.io leaderboards. But one thing that we don't see it in very much at all is raid. And part of that is just that magic damage, right, is something that Prot Warrior handles so poorly compared to every other, most of the other tank specs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially this raid tier, there's just so much magic damage on every boss. And raid is so much different from Mythic Plus. Like you have 4 or 5 healers usually. They're all kind of passively healing you. And whichever tank reduces the encounter's damage the most is usually ideal. Sometimes the utility from the tanks is nice, like Blood Decay grips are really cool on certain fights, every expansion. But in general, it's just whichever tank takes the least damage and does the most damage is the best. So,
well, they don't even do the most damage in raid, right?
Right.
They
That's
actually
another
do less
reason why
damage.
they're not good.
They're actually doing less damage than Blood Death Knight and Vengeance Demon Hunter. And then, of course, everybody's running a Brewmaster Monk because you need the fucking 5% physical buff. Lol.
Yeah. So, Prot Warrior is very good when it can spell reflect, right? Anything that is spell reflectable, Prot Warrior owns that. So there are some, like, Carapace and Azoth, for instance, you can spell reflect Mandible Slam every other one. That's really big for Prot Warriors, but outside of fights like that, where the magic damage is kind of consistent and on you at all times, they're just sitting there with no big defense against it, and that works poorly. Not true at all. Someone says, is that about the Mandible Slam?
It's really like, well, yeah, you can reflect every second or every third. You can
on heroic. Okay, so if you're talking about the heroic timings, it's different on Mythic. It casts less often on Mythic, so it's. I think you can reflect every other on Mythic because you can AMS every like 4th on Mythic,
gotcha,
where
yeah.
you can only AMS like every 7th on heroic. But yeah, okay. This is actually a discussion about damage from tanks. So okay.
Are you sure? I think our 70 corruption Blood Decay does way more damage than Prot Warrior. But
yeah.
maybe that's incorrect.
Well, let's solve this. So somebody in chat is saying that Prot Warrior is #1 damage in raid according to Warcraft logs. Let's investigate.
This is a big discussion because that could just be corruption. Maybe it was even the pre-nerf Echoing Void.
Well, this is post nerf
too.
And yeah, let's set 95th.
Are you taking all encounters? What are you taking?
Yeah, so this is damage all bosses, tanks all item levels. Let's look at damage to bosses. Yeah.
What about
Just
Shadow,
look
like
boss.
single target?
Damage to bosses, Prot Warrior also here at the top of this, but there are a lot less parses than them. Let's take a look at rankings. Actually, this is one way to sanity check this.
You can't do all bosses. Yeah.
If you just look at the rankings, and we can see, all right, from all tanks, we can take a look at which tanks are actually getting the top rankings on a lot of the bosses. So Boost is a huge Prot Warrior that always has really high damage parses. But if you look at these, on most boss fights, there are a couple Prot Warriors that are doing high on damage here, but most of these top rankings are not warrior. On Shadowheart, it actually is a warrior on first. We're seeing a lot
60K.
of other stuff. Yeah, of course, as we get lower than like Il'gynoth, then that's where there stop being warriors who've done these later bosses. But yeah, it's still, there are a couple warriors that are pretty high on this, but there are a lot fewer warriors than there are of other ones. So the people who are playing warriors are like, there's always this thing with logs where when you open up a statistics thing like this, and then you just sort by parses, and you see, all right, one of these classes actually is being represented 5 times less than the top most represented one. That's always going to be an effect that means that like there are a lot of mediocre players that are gravitating towards Brewmaster, right? A lot of the multi-classers are going to play the Brewmaster, right? The people who are playing Prot Warrior still are the Prot Warrior one tricks, right? And so that is going to be an effect that helps Prot Warrior and hurts Brewmaster on a graph like this.
Or they're the warriors in my guild who play Mythic Plus, but also just right on the side.
Right.
I think we're the only double Prot Warrior guild out there. We're currently 6 out of 12. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, you guys are gonna have a good time when you get Carapace. That's gonna be a good fight for you guys. No, I'm not kidding. You just spell reflect. You can probably spell reflect every Mandible Slam, I think.
Oh yeah, we probably could. Just taunt everyone.
You just taunt everyone and reflect. Might be Megapog.
And then we also have Avatar for each giant ad spawn at the last phase. That'd be good.
Whoa, yeah.
That'd be fun.
Oh, yeah, because, you want those to actually live sometimes. You don't.
Well, you gotta get threat. That's the problem.
Yeah, the third set is one that you want to live. You can just play the AoE Taunt Essence. What are they gonna do?
Yeah, that is a good point.
There's no counterplay.
We just play Ox Statue because Brewmaster Monk.
Yeah, but they spawn pretty spread. Like, I know the Mass Taunt doesn't get all the mobs all the time. Like, I've been talking to my girlfriend that plays Brewmaster on that fight, and she has problems picking up threat. And your guild Tettles, I've been talking to her about.
Well, yeah, because they spawn 60 yards away, but
yeah, so Statue does not get all those.
Well, okay, so they start mailing you, and you just walk in, and then she AoE taunts off.
Yeah.
But that's not when the problem is. It's when they spawn. You want to make sure that they don't hit your raid members when they're all over the place. And so something like Thunderclap, which we talked about earlier, is the best thing for Skittish, is ideal for that case as well. So we'll have fun on that boss.
Yeah, you guys are gonna own that boss for sure. N'Zoth the Corruptor itself, that may be a little bit more sketchy.
They're gonna die.
Yeah.
First mind rack cast, they're just gonna instantly die. There's 0 counter.
Like, we'll deal with that when we get there, okay? Maybe they'll nerf it.
Yeah, it'll be a nerf boss by the time Twitch Prime is on
it. I expect the warrior would actually just die to the first mind rack cast.
All right, we're talking about the Thought Harvesters here, not the interruptible one from Psychus. Yeah, those Thought Harvesters are gonna be very brutal. Let's talk about Brewmaster Monk, though. That's the next tank that we want to talk about, the playstyle of it. Of course, Trell, you used to be a Brewmaster before you decided that you wanted to betray all of your loyal fans.
Oh my god.
Flavor of the Month reroll. So,
for those who don't know, Trell, whenever he's in private Discord channels, he sits there and was like, LOL, all of my YouTube viewers keep commenting about when am I going back to Brewmaster Monk, but little do they know I'm doing this just to spite them, to rile them up.
Very false. I multi-class. I play Warrior for high keys and MDI, and I play Brewmaster on live usually, and then whatever tank is fun at the time.
Okay, yeah. So what is it that you like about the Brewmaster Monk playstyle?
Brewmaster is just really fun because it's so mobile. Like, you can always get somewhere if you need to be there. And keys especially, you have tons of control over the mobs, and you can place yourself wherever you want to be, like in melee range or 100 yards away pretty quick. And then you switch to another class like Blood Decay or Prot Warrior, and you're just like, I'm a slow-moving tub of molasses compared to Brewmaster.
Yeah, that's definitely a big difference between Brewmaster and the other ones.
The other thing is, you can set up your initial mitigation and just forget about it. Like, you can set up a 21-second Iron Skin Brew and forget about it for that amount of time, which is kind of the same case with Last Stand, but you could do it more often as Brewmaster. And so that being said, you can kind of lead the key more effectively without losing focus on the more important mitigation things, because it's already gone 20 seconds ago and you got it going. I enjoy that personally, so I can focus on controlling the packs, but maybe not everybody.
Yeah, one problem with it this season is that, like, you kind of still have to kite with your Iron Skin Brew up in high keys, right? Like, you're just still getting slapped around compared to last season.
Yeah, we do take a lot of damage right now.
Yeah, Brewmaster Monk, of course, got a set of nerfs, and those have hurt quite a lot. But it still works, right? You can still key on this thing; it's still fine.
Well, okay, so why is it seen so much in raid? Is it just because of the physical damage debuff then?
Yeah. So
well, it's good for N'Zoth, right? It's good for the debuff, and those are basically the biggest things because you base it on the last boss of the raid tier, and then you go from there.
Yeah,
to gear on each raid boss.
I've switched over to Brewmaster for N'Zoth. I played Blood Death Knight for most of the other bosses, and it's very good on that fight. But on most fights, you really just need the one Brewmaster for the damage taken buff, the physical buff. And then, honestly, I think that Blood Death Knight, Vengeance Demon Hunter are both better than the second Brewmaster as your other tank. Like those are very strong, tanky tanks for requiring very little healing, and that is not something that Brewmaster does very well. Okay, let's talk about the tank affixes here: Skittish, Bursting, and Necrotic. You were talking about Keg Smash being on a 6-second cooldown. I know when I've played both with and as Brewmaster, sometimes I feel really, really, really vulnerable when that Keg, like, if I am losing threat on stuff and I Keg Smash and like I miss something with it, I just can never get threat back. Has that been your experience as well, Trell?
It's a never-ending cycle. If you miss one mob with that first Keg Smash, even on non-skittish, you can really have to battle for threat for like 30 seconds on the pack, because then you have to shift your attention to that one mob, and then you might lose threat on another mob because of that, and you have to do something inefficient. So you have to, like, as opposed to Warrior, you have to wait till all the mobs are within range of the Keg Smash before you even do your very first one. Like, you got to make sure the group members that you're playing with understand that, because you're not going to have a lot of threat until that first Keg Smash. And then as long as you hit every mob, you're probably going to land the second Keg Smash after that, so then it's okay. But
yeah, and then you get your Breath of Fire. You get your Breath of Fire rolling on them if you hit the first Keg Smash and everything, but if you don't, then you don't get that dot on whatever you missed as well. And it just kind of all cascades into a disaster from there.
Yeah, every time I swap back from Warrior to Brewmaster, for whatever reason at the time, people die in the key. Like, they'll just die to threat because they forget how much of a challenge it actually is for other tanks sometimes.
Monk actually has a pretty good tool for bursting as well. High bursting stacks, Zen Meditation. I'd
say Monk is probably the best, except maybe Prop Pally against bursting, because they can't immune it. But they have two humongous cooldowns that work really well against it. Dampen Harm and Zen Med are huge DRs that you can channel or cast before the bursting and just mitigate the entire thing for free. And you have the lowest health out of the tank.
Right, so since bursting is a % health damage thing, it is the least bad against Monk, because Monk has a low health pool and a high... Even though Monk has a high effective health, it's low actual health.
Right, and some of the bursting goes into your stagger, just a little bit to the magic damage portion of stagger.
30% or whatever, yeah. Necrotic is something that Brewmaster can have necrotic challenges in certain situations, but is really very good for it in most cases, right? You can
kite... On single target, they're unmatched, yeah. Like, you can just naturally drop stacks without even having to worry about it all the time, because of how much you dodge hits. On AoE, you have lots of tools for kiting. The only time Brewmaster is challenged against Necrotic is really when there's a mob that you can't kite, or a pole that you can't kite, like if you're in a snap spot. That's when it's challenging.
Yeah, but that there is challenging for everybody, right? And it's worse for everybody else because Brewmaster is still dodging, a pretty high percentage of those those attacks.
I would say that Brewmaster is probably the best versus Necrotic from my experiences too, just because of like 100%. Having that immense amount of mobility with roll / G torpedo, whatever they're playing, Ring of Peace, all of those other tools in their toolkit. I think they're probably the best at Necrotic.
All right, let's talk about Guardian Druid. So Guardian Druid, the year of the bear. Tettles is
it's the year of the Vengeance Demon Hunter.
Okay, we'll get to that soon, but let's talk about Druid. So Tettles, Trell, you guys have both actually played Guardian a little bit in the past couple months. This is a spec that I think one of the main things that you'll know you're playing with a Guardian Druid is if they die 2 seconds into a pull. That
could be a Death Knight too.
Yeah, that could be a Death Knight. Death Knights can die at any point in a pull, though. Guardian Druid is really those first 2 seconds of the pull, where they're just very, very, very likely to be on the floor. Trell, why is the start of a pull such a rough time for Guardian Druid?
So Guardian Druid is kind of based off of proactive mitigation, right? You get several Iron First stacks going and your Thrash stacks going, and then you're You take a small amount of damage after that, but initially you have to get to that point. And so let's say you go into a pool and you don't have 3 stacks of Thrash on, you're not getting that 6% damage reduction from the mobs. You also don't have more than 1 stack of Iron Fur, most likely, unless you went into the pack with full Rage. Then you could probably have 2 on pull. But without that, you kind of have to ramp up your mitigation, whereas other tanks, like Prot Warrior on the other end of the spectrum, just have their entire mitigation kit the moment they enter the pool.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge for Bear for sure.
Bear does get to be extremely tanky against physical damage when they, like, if they know it's coming, right, and they can stack up some Iron Furs. So stuff like the Spirit Breaker, for instance, they can tank that really effectively compared to everybody else, because Iron Fur is effective against it.
That's true. They're pretty good against that.
And once they actually get the pull started too, whenever they have their Thrashes out, they get a lot of rage just from like Rend and Tear and just by spamming Thrash. So they're able to, once the pull gets started, they're okay. But getting those mobs grouped up, that's where you're going to want to use stuff like your Iron Barks, your Sacks. I would say that using the Holy Pally tried and true bop me while I group these mobs is probably better for Bear than other tanks as well. You could also just run around in stag form if you would like, and while the bop is on you and grouping mobs, I mean, there's just so many things that you can do.
Yeah,
But
you can.
You
Yeah,
just have to play around it pretty heavily.
Yep. Druid actually can do fairly good damage, even with a fairly tanky build. They are pretty high damage, and they are one of the specs that scales Twilight Dev best, and Echoing Void. But Twilight Devastation is really the main Mythic Plus tank damage essence or corruption these days. And bears have a high health pool, so they do high amounts of damage with Twilight Devastation. So
Very cool, dude.
that's very cool. So yeah, when you're asking how good is Druid against Skittish, part of the answer is, can they proc a Twilight Devastation in the first 5 seconds of the pull?
It's the same thing. It's like Skittish is hard at the beginning of a pull too, because they don't have their stacks up yet. But once they get going, they do have a really good threat. It's actually, I think Thrash just does more threat than most tank AoE abilities. I feel like for sure more than Kicksman.
Like, they also have Moonfire that they can spam if they do ever need to actually kite. So they can run away from the pack and just keep Moonfiring to maintain at least some threat. It's not good threat, it's just something, though. More than other tanks.
Yeah, Paladin's also
is nice, though.
Paladin's kind of the other tank that can maintain a lot of threat from range by kiting through Blessed Hammers and Consecration and stuff, but Druid also pretty good at keeping, some threat while kiting. Bursting is another one where Druids are pretty bad against bursting while they have to keep tanking, but once the actual all the enemies are dead, they can swap out of bear form, right? And
they heal themselves. Yes.
Yeah. So
bursting feels really good on Druid if you can end the pack and it has like 10 stacks. You just go human form and you Swiftman yourself for like your entire health bar, and then you can also regrowth yourself after that. You have a ton of self healing as Druid. It's actually really fun if you get
when you
have the tank.
When you kill 9 swords and there's still a Sky Screamer hitting you, then you're like, oh god,
I'm dead.
I'm dead. Yeah,
that's not an ideal situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you jump out of the snap spot, the Sky Screamer will port to you and then kill you anyway. It's
you need to like stun it and then go human form and heal.
Or you just YOLO it and you just heal anyways, and you pray it doesn't kill you.
Yeah.
I've seen that one a couple of times, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I've seen some I've seen some things from some Guardian Druids as well. Human form, a very scary thing to be in, though.
I think the funnest part about Guardian is the times you can find some off healing to do safely in human form. Like one example that I like to do is on Kragmaw, the Boston Underrot. If you shift human form right as he starts his tantrum and wild growth the party, you'll hit all 5 players, and then you can Swiftman yourself right after that, or someone else while you're soaking the ticks, and then hop back in bear form before the boss comes back and melees you. I mean, he'll one-shot you if you're in human form, so you got to be careful, but it's really cool to do and helps the healer quite a bit.
And you can run around in stag form too, so you just have more movement speed to be able to soak stuff. Another one is also Soulbound Goliath. While making sure that you do this well is important, but you can actually shift out whenever he walks into the fire and Swiftman yourself to top yourself and then go back into bear form. However, if the fire despawns moments before you are able to get that off, then he will melee you and kill you.
Interesting, Tuttles. That's
who would do that?
I don't know, man. That's a great question.
All right. let's move on to Death Knight. So Death Knight also has a weakness on pull, as the star identified, right? Like at the start of a pull, you can very much die playing Death Knight too. You kind of have these first couple globals where you need to cast Marrow Rend to build up your bone shields. And one problem with that is Marrow Rend is a single target damaging ability. So at the start of a pull, you also need to generate threat. So you often end up in the situation where you go into a pull and you're like, all right, I got to do one Marrow Rend to build up some bone shields, and now I need to cast like Blood Boil, Death and Decay to try and get some threat on these things, and then some like AoE heart strikes, and then you're low on bone shield charges. So realistically, on pull, you'll often want to like Dancing Rune Weapon at the start of a pull, or Vampiric Blood into a pull, so that you can have some free time to do these threat generating abilities and not just be dead. But you can't always do that. So sometimes you're going to be in big jeopardy at the start of a pull, right?
It's true. I've never liked that about DK, having to choose globals between survival and threat. I've never liked dealing with that paradigm. I know some people have made it work, and Legion it was a lot better because threat wasn't nearly as difficult to get, and you could just put down Death and Decay and pretty much have threat for a couple seconds normally. But in this expansion, you got to really work for threat as a Blood DK.
Aren't people playing Red Thirst now as opposed to Bone Storm in pretty much all situations?
In high keys, yeah. In like below 20, you can play Bone Storm.
Bone Storm is almost a waste of your runic power these days, in higher keys than like 15 probably.
That is such a shame.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is Death
Strike
Strike
doesn't even heal you enough.
Death Strike's healing scales with the incoming damage in a really nice way, whereas Bone Storm's does not. And yeah, Red Thirst is actually a damage increase now because it gives you more uptime on Vampiric Blood, which gives you more Twilight Devastation damage. So,
yeah, we got Star chat, very seasoned Blood DK player, affirming our thoughts.
It's I don't know. The big problem with Blood Death Knight is still that like in just a regular plus 22 fortified, a freehold shipmate or whatever can come and hit you for half your health with a white auto attack.
Dude, that's the worst feeling ever.
Does it actually?
When a tiny neutral mob walks up and just kills you as a tank, you're just like,
yeah,
is this really okay?
What in the world? Well, okay, so for those who don't know, DK got a pretty substantial hit to their base armor rating.
Yeah,
and since then they have not been the same.
It's never been the same. Yeah, it's good in raid. Like in raid, you're fine because nothing in raid hits as hard as a freehold shipmate does in the plus 22. But yeah, in those plus 22s, you really start falling over on it. Like the ceiling on how high you can push as a Blood Death Knight is just a little lower than those other tank specs because of the fact that you're just going to be actual one shot at a much lower level. DK is also a spec that doesn't have much mobility. That's a drawback too.
Oh, they're so slow, man.
It is good against bursting, so you can AMS to prevent the application of bursting stacks to you, which is nice. And is really fun because in a key where you actually are like able to survive the initial hits, you are in big control of your own life, right? In a way that other tanks like rely on healers. A Blood Death Knight really doesn't rely on any healing. If you are like you can survive for 30 seconds without any healing in a way that no other tanks really can while tanking.
I'd say Blood DK appreciates externals or trees more than other tanks just because they have more self-healing and their mitigation is so based on the self-healing that they just need as much damage reduction as possible to make sure they don't get one shot. So like bark and trees are just so nice to have as Blood DK.
Yeah, and then Necrotic, also not good for Blood Death Knight. Self-healing reduction is bad, and it's no longer AMSable as well. They changed it in patch 8.1 such that you can no longer AMS to prevent new stacks of Necrotic being applied.
It's a full 180 from Legion, where Blood DK was by far the best tank for Necrotic, where they had Dancing Rune Weapon, which would pretty much parry every single melee coming at you for the duration, which is an insane.
Yeah, because you had two rune weapons, not one back then.
Right.
Yeah.
And then after that wore off, you could also AMS to just completely negate any Necrotic stacks.
Leech worked through Necrotic, which you got off your consumption.
They just had it all, man.
Yeah. Man, those are the good old days.
Leech off consumption was so fucking stupid.
Yeah.
So why are we seeing more Blood Death Knights in Raiden then now?
So it's great at handling magic damage. There are a couple of things you can AMS for value, and just your very low healing required because of the nature of Death Strikes against raid damage profiles. Now that the spec is scaled up to a point where raid bosses aren't really one-shotting it at all.
Raid boss one-shotting it previously?
It was a lot more tenuous previously. It wasn't like impossible, but you were a lot more paper than like relative to Brewmaster. You were paper in previous raids, and now you're not. You're fine.
So is it because Brewmaster got nerfed and people aren't running double brew, or is it because Blood Death Knight is actually just good now?
Both.
There's a little bit of both.
Yeah, like
I think
Blood is better than Blood was in previous tiers, and it's also better relative to Brewmaster than it was in previous tiers.
Right. And also the fact that Blood DK can handle corruption, the more corruption on themselves, more so than other tanks, I think, on progression, is a really good bonus for them. Like, I think now probably ran 60 to 70 corruption on Nazoth, is what I remember hearing.
Yeah.
And he did it pretty safely, and he did a lot of damage because of that with the Echoing Void piece.
I think he was under that Cascading Disaster, I think, but maybe not. He may have been playing Cascading Disaster. I don't know. Blood is very good at handling corruption effects because, especially in raid, you have Death and Decay slow, AMS. You know, those are very powerful tools for preventing the worst things from beyond that are about to connect with you. And the ones that are not in dangerous times don't cause you to require any extra healing, basically, because of death strikes.
Okay.
Right.
So if it's not going to cause you to actually die, it's not going to cause you to require any extra healing. In most cases, so that's a difference from like Brewmaster or whatever. All right, let's talk about Vengeance Demon Hunters. So Vengeance Demon Hunters have that thing we were talking about earlier. They're very tanky in meta. They're very tanky in Demon Spikes, and they are very untanky without it. Unlike Guardian Druid and Blood Death Knight, they can just press Demon Spikes at the start of a pull very easily, so they can be tanky on pull, which is nice.
Yeah, for those that haven't played it in a while, Demon Spikes is now a free cost ability, but it just has low uptime. So you got to plan it out very carefully, but you don't have to save resource for it. You just use your resource solely on Soul Cleave or Spirit Bomb.
Now you can play Demon Hunter such that you have very, very high uptime on Demon Spikes or meta. Like you can play a build that you can play Gluttony, you can even play Feed the Demon if you want. You can play stuff like Ineffable Truth, Corruptions, those sorts of effects. If you really, yeah, you can. Look,
are people playing that?
No, but you can. Somebody in chat earlier was saying,
maybe at some point.
I had 92% uptime on Demon Spikes or whatever, and it's like, yeah, okay, you can move the slider on how tanky your Vengeance Demon Hunter is as far as you want, but there's a drawback, right? You're sacrificing damage at every point along the way. So in a Mythic Plus setting, usually you do want to be playing that Gluttony, and you want to play like Vision of Perfection often too. And that'll give you very high uptime on meta and or Demon Spikes. But you don't usually need to go that much more tanky than that. That's usually sufficiently tanky. And you get, huge Twilight Devastation damage too, which is nice.
Speaking of their strengths, you want to pull up that log in chat and
all
show
right,
them
sure.
what they're
So yeah, this
capable
is the one tank Shadhar Demon
that
Hunter.
Guy only pressed sheer.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Demon Spikes.
So let's take a look at this cast log from the tank.
Don't look at the cast log. No, it's an abomination.
Wait, why? Oh, this is targets. Hang on. Cast by source. Why isn't this working?
Always find that the reason why they could do so much healing is because their healing does scale with damage taken, kind of like Blood Decay did last expansion, but not as much anymore. So when they take large amounts of magic damage and physical damage, but mostly the magic damage is their strong point, they can just heal for a metric buttload. And you'll see them on fights like Shadow of Zul and Shadhar, where they just do so much HPS and actually require not very much healing because of that.
All right, I found it. Here is the cast timeline here. So it starts with a taunt, Throglaive, Sigil of Flame, Sheer, Immolation Aura, Sheer.
Forgot his Demon Spikes.
Sheer. There are a few Demon Spikes in here. Yeah, there's Demon Spikes being cast as well. Fiery Brand coming out too. And then it's some more Shears along the way. A lot of Shears happening here. Mostly
You're
Sheer.
telling me in this build they don't even press Soul Cleave.
Yeah, Sheer is being cast again.
Yes. This is Feed the Demon.
One Soul Cleave. Oh, there's a Soul Cleave here at.
Oh my god.
At 4 minutes and 39 seconds, they cast Soul Cleave.
That was a misclick.
Well, that was to kill the boss. The boss was dead at that point, so they were just getting it over the finish line there, right at the end. But yeah, there's one Soul Cleave in this log.
I guess that's because of the Soulmonger traits. They get more value out of Soulmonger, I think, if only one soul is consumed at a time. I don't know the exact reason why only Shear is pressed, but it does make it so you do a huge amount of healing.
Yeah, so this is this is a very, very tanky build, of course. Haste intensive as well for extra Demon Spikes uptime.
100k or 180k HPS.
Yeah, let's look at that healing breakdown. Again, yeah, so it's all just the fact that soul fragments heal you for 8% of the damage taken in the last 5 seconds. So it scales really nicely with huge incoming damage, of which this person took a lot of incoming damage. They took 70 million damage over the course of this 4 minutes and 42 seconds. So they took 250k damage every single second, which is...
So they were healing most of it.
Yes, yeah. So if we look at the actual external healing required per second, it's not that absurd for a tank here. They only required 76k externally from other sources, so... Yeah,
it's really not that bad. That's passive, basically.
Very cool spec. Of course, that's not something that is a little bit of a weird case, but in like a Mythic Plus setting, this can also be a very tanky tank, right? This patch in particular,
absolutely, yeah.
It's so tanky if you're playing that. If you're playing Gluttony Vision, like it's hard to die. And Demon Hunters get a cheat death too. They can talent into a cheat death that's actually not costly, right? Like you give up Soul Barrier, which is not. Obviously, you'd like to have that talent, but it's not the end of the world to lose it.
I think if you don't need Spell Reflect for the dungeon, I think Vengeance Demon Hunter is probably the best tank for Mythic Plus pushing right now.
For survival, I think I would agree. It's really niche, though, because a lot of times you want the Prot Warrior for lots of other things. And so I think Prot still takes number one, but Vengeance is a close second.
Yeah, and Vengeance scales up better. Like with 50 extra Corruption resist, Vengeance gets more damage from that 50 Corruption than anybody else, or than Prot Warrior does, right?
Correct.
Right.
But they do have issues with Threat, which is...
Yes. So, it's not the end of the world for them to build Threat, but they do sometimes have some trouble with it. They go like Sigil of Flame into Leap In, into like, Fracture Soul Cleave or whatever, and build a little bit of Threat that way. But if they don't proc Twilight Devastation and stuff, then it can be pretty hard to hold Threat.
Yeah. It's weird to me that their wall is a single target wall that they place on a target. Like I don't understand why their wall is the way.
That is a very odd thing to have as a tank, like a single target wall. You have to choose the mob that deals 40% less damage to you in any given pull. I think you use it on average like once a pull in high keys. On bosses, you probably get it 2 or 3 times depending on the fight length. But on AoE packs, you probably want to find whichever mob does the most damage to you and brand that guy as soon as you.
Oh yeah. I remember the good old days in Legion where it would spread. Your firebranded spread as a nice thing.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's talk.
Legion. Legion was great for Vengeance. The not only did you heal a lot in Legion still, but you also had legendaries that would increase your Demon Spikes uptime, and you had more ways to increase your damage from what was it called? Where you stood in magic damage and you got the. Do you guys remember that?
What was yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but if you took magic damage, it would increase your main stat, and you could deal more healing and empowered wards. Thank you.
That was good.
They also had the cheat death that would go away if you killed yourself. So you would proc your cheat. Okay, so you would use all of your sigils. You would use meta to replenish all of your sigils. Then you would proc cheat to replenish all of your sigils, and you would just chain them over and over again. And then after the pull is over, you would leap into a trash pack, die, get master res, and then go again.
Yeah. That was back in the good old days when cheat deaths would reset on death, which does not work that way anymore.
Always so funny to watch Shaq leap into a pack.
Yeah, he would have like these spots on every... After every pull, he would like jump and die to fall damage. He'd have these perfect fall damage spots. And I just laugh so hard every time watching him die after every pull on purpose. It was so good though. You got like 3 metas every pull sometimes because of cheat death and sigil resets. It was really strong.
Yeah, but that was Legion. This is no longer.
All right, let's talk about Protection Paladins here. As the final of the 6 tank specs. This is one where it's kind of like Vengeance Demon Hunter in that you need Shield of the Righteous to be up to be tanky. Unlike Vengeance Demon Hunter, you're equally dead when you don't have Shield of the Righteous up, but Shield of the Righteous doesn't actually make you all that tanky compared to what Demon Spikes does. So
Right.
this is a very squishy tank in the current iteration of the game. That's kind of the main problem with Prot Paladin, is that even in Shield of the Righteous, you just aren't naturally tanky against much. Your self-heal... So this is also a tank that does do some self-healing to itself, but its self-healing is based off of the percent of missing health it's on, not based on the total amount of damage it's taken recently. So it scales a little bit less well into high keys because of that. And it can only heal itself once every, 10 seconds or whatever, depending on haste and talents. So you can't, build up some runic power and then spam death strikes in a way that Blood Death Knight can. So that's a difference with Paladin. Paladin, I think, is one of the toughest tanks to be playing right now in keys and stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. The scaling thing from their self healing is kind of a problem for Pally going into higher keys, but it is a fun class to play with all the utility from bubble, spell warding, boss, party heals, and everything else you can do. That's pretty crazy on certain affixes.
Right. So yeah, group utility is kind of the thing that Paladin gets that other tanks don't get. You can put an external on one of your DPS. You can sack one of your DPS, which can be big for certain boss mechanics and abilities. You have a lot of personal defensives that you can use as well. You have bubble. You have you have bop. Those are very powerful things. You have freedom, and you can lay on hand somebody. You can talent into your heal being AoE or being on your friends as well. Although often that's not something you'll actually do in Mythic Plus. That's more of a raid thing that
Right.
you'll do there. Or if you're trying to play with no healer, for the most part though, you generally don't do that in Mythic Plus. And that's kind of, I guess one thing to note is that it does also have Avenger Shield, right? That's a huge part of the gameplay too. Is that you can single-handedly lock down a mob. You can get a ton of interrupts against a bunch of different, boss fights or whatever in a way that other tanks can't. So that can be pretty cool too.
Yeah, I think the most recent time I saw Prot Pally in a progression setting for raid, it was on Xanesh. BDG ran 2 of them because they can single-handedly interrupt every single Terrified cast. So.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. It's very strong.
That is a very cool part of the Prot Paladin. It is smart to multi-class onto that for Xanesh as well, because that boss doesn't really do much damage to the tanks either. So it's a fine one to play a tank that has a little bit more weakness there.
I think it's interesting that Prot Pally is probably the best supplemental tank for raid, but part of the problem and the reason that you're not seeing them this patch is because they are just so bad versus or not that they're so bad, but they just don't get enough damage from corruption. And this patch right now, you're just running, oh, hello, Blood Death Knight with 80 corruption. Nice to see you. How are you doing? And then, of course, like we were talking about earlier, you're just your physical damage debuff.
Because Prot Pallies don't have very much base health, so they are scaling Twilight Dev half as hard as Blood Death Knight is. And that can be bad. They do have a lot of tools. They have good tools for a lot of different affixes, though. They are probably the best tank against Necrotic and Bursting of any of them. So Necrotic, they can bop and bubble to remove Necrotic on themselves and then cancel it if they need to. They can bop, cancel, bop fairly frequently to remove Necrotic from themselves. Against Bursting, they can also, they have a lot of self-healing that is effective against Bursting, or they can bubble it, or they can talent Spell Warding for Bursting weeks too. It is an option, but Bop has a lot of utility in a lot of dungeons too, so it's situational there. And Skittish is something that they have an AoE taunt in their bubble if they talent into that, and that can be pretty effective in a lot of situations too. So
I think their damage on pull is normally pretty good, right? They're not that bad versus Skittish.
Especially in medium-sized packs where Avenger Shield is hitting almost everything in the pack. That does quite a bit of damage up front, and Shield of the Righteous is something that's off the global cooldown that does a fairly high amount of damage too, so if they press 2 Shield of the Righteouses on pull, that'll do pretty big AoE threat.
I think the only time they have a problem with threat is when the pull is very spread coming in. Picture on the spread pull scenarios that I talk about, I always think of the pull right before Priestess and Ataldazar, where mobs are just coming in from a wide range in front of you, and you have to get thrown on all of them at the same time. So I think Pally would struggle with that, but everything else are pretty good on.
Yeah, I mean, a nice thing about that pull, though, is that Pally just throws a shield at the Augur in that pull, and then they don't have to worry about grouping up a caster in the same way that other tanks do, because the caster's just
So-
silenced and running at you.
What tanks are good at gaining threat on all of that? Like that number of mobs that are that spread. Is there any tank that's
Warrior.
really good at it?
Death Knight.
Are they really good at it though?
Death grip, mass grip.
Yeah, Warrior's great at that. You clap one time, and you're gonna hit all the mobs probably. And if you didn't hit a mob, you have another clap 2 seconds later.
Okay.
And most tanks can't say that.
Yeah, Death Knight has grip as well for that kind of situation, right? And Demon Hunter. So when they're that spread apart, it's bad for Demon Hunter, but that can definitely be a problem for a lot of tanks. Yeah, that particular pull when you're trying to get those 2 priestesses from the side. But what you can usually do is pull those priestesses in late, right? Like that's the thing about that pull is that the priestesses die naturally.
Yeah, there's always options, right? But it's just like having a strength like that in general is something you got to understand for tanks.
That's
where
the thing about warriors.
this
Yeah,
tank's gonna get AoE threat. This tank might.
warrior's just so free to hit everything with like their thunderclap is just going to rip threat off of everybody in a way that like Throwglaive, Judgment or whatever. Well, Judgment's pretty good, but Throwglaive, Death's Caress or whatever, you use your heroic throw. Any of those kind of any of those sorts of abilities are not going to hold threat against people who are actually generating threat. So that's a problem for you need more than those to build threat. Whereas and like something being hit by one of your spinning blessed hammers or stepping in your consecration for half a second, that's not going to build threat on it enough to keep it off of your DPS who are eye beaming, right?
But
Exactly.
they do also gain threat from their healing.
Yes,
too,
yeah,
which is something
It's true.
to note.
is a notable thing that is a benefit for Paladin. Yeah. Anyways, let's close this out by answering some. I see a good question in chat. We'll kind of move into question and answers with this. So this one's from Batman in chat. What would be the best tank for a new player or a new tank? Trell, what do you recommend for somebody who's new to this?
Depends on what you want to do. I think for raid, you'd want to play Brewmaster as a new tank player. You can kind of hit and forget your mitigation for a while. You can probably survive most raid fights without even purifying efficiently at all. The
Absolutely.
most challenging tank would probably be Paladin in either set of content because when you don't have anything up, it's pretty hard to live. You don't have very many options. You don't cheat death. Vengeance would probably be the next hardest for that.
Yeah, I
But
think it
for-
depends on the level of content you're doing. Like if you're trying to do like +5 keys, Paladin's pretty like one of the nice things about Paladin is that it's very good at doing everything in a pug.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you're playing below the level where like damage numbers are actually really big against you, and you're just kind of trying to like, start from there, you aren't going to run into the problems that we've been talking about. But Paladin does have a lot of buttons. Yeah.
Every content is different, even at different levels in Mythic Plus, different difficulty levels in raid. Different tanks are better at all those situations. Like I'd argue that saying Bear is probably the easiest to learn in all medium levels of content because it's so straightforward. Like you press Iron Fur to take less damage, and you press your healing button, Frenzied Region, to heal yourself up. And otherwise, you press Thrash.
I like
great.
I like recommending like Demon Hunter for people that are trying to like start tanking in a fairly high level this season. I think Demon Hunter's a nice tank that you have a lot of options in your kit for how much to focus on offense versus defense. And if you focus a lot on defense, you'll be able to live anything and get started there. So that's been my recommendation. But yeah, I think that really a lot of it should be just find out what playstyle you're most interested in learning, because whatever you have the most fun playing is going to be a great place to start. So I would go like that. That's part of the reason I like this episode. I wanted to do this episode was so that we could talk about the different playstyles of the tanks, and different people are going to hear different tanks and be like, oh, that sounds fun. And so go with that. All right. Next question comes from Morsha in Discord. Since it came up in general chat this week, it might be interesting to have a discussion about when looking at DPS meters, or about when looking at DPS meters is valuable, specifically overall. I think most of my depletes are easily attributable to wipes and mistakes, but theoretically higher overall DPS saves us enough time to afford to wipe. I personally don't know when to make that distinction. Tettles, what do you think about this one?
In general, I think looking at overall can diagnose some problems. I think people are a little bit too gung-ho as to like what overall actually means relative to the scope of the key. In addition to that, it's very challenging to tell whenever people are actually losing single target damage to play for more overall or AoE. Think about something like Twilight Devastation. So say your single target say playing your single target traits or single target corruption is going to be gaining you 3 times as much damage on single target than what a Twilight Devastation build would give you. But Twilight Devastation is going to do twice as much on 8 target packs. Would you rather play for the Twilight Devastation, or would you rather play for the single target there? Personally, I would rather play for the single target, but that wouldn't be higher overall damage. You'd rather play for the Twilight Devastation in that regard. So sometimes overall can be misleading. As for like, okay, so if you're like depleting a key and you have a wipe or like multiple major mistakes, I would almost 100% of the time attribute a deplete to that. Not we need more overall DPS to be able to make sure that we can afford a wipe, because very infrequently. Okay, so I normally want to play the dungeon out near perfectly first, and then look at where we can gain damage secondary. I think that is the best way to approach it. And then the damage will come as players get more comfortable, as you pull bigger. Because overall DPS is just like a facet of how you're pulling as a group.
Right.
How your tank is actually pulling, how comfortable your group is, how people are holding their cooldowns. And sometimes I was actually playing Spark of Inspiration Major this past week, which is not good for my individual damage. I don't think it's that great. In retrospect, I don't think it's that great, but that's just like a point of like, okay, so one person's individual damage is going to look like shit. The other 2 to 3, or the other 3 players are going to look okay, but one player is going to look really bad. It was not very good, but that's just like how it can be misleading in some ways.
Yeah, it's it's a metric that it's not like it's not valuable to look at overall damage, right? Like if you look at overall damage and somebody has, half as much damage as the rest of the group, like there's probably a problem there.
Oh yeah, no, they're probably just
they probably died a couple times or they're under gear.
There are definitely good decisions players can make that will cost them 10% of their overall damage and speed up the dungeon. So you need to make sure that whatever culture you're building in your group doesn't stop people from making those decisions.
And like somebody said, familiarity is the biggest damage increase. I would 100% agree with that. It's like just running through the polls multiple times and making sure that you understand how to be using your cooldowns, when to be using your cooldowns, how big the tank is going to be pulling, when you should actually start DPSing a pack, or how the pack is going to be spread later on. That's always going to be somewhat important, because there are things that are not really within your control. Like if you pull threat on one mob or like multiple mobs too early, and then the pack gets spread for the duration of the pull, it's going to be very challenging for your group to be able to do good damage to that pack, because your tank is actively trying to get threat back, and your DPS are probably panicking, trying to run around, like whatever.
All right, our next question comes from Tango6996, who says, quick question, can we pre-take bots in Junkyard before activating the key? Charlie, I think the answer to this one is no, right?
The answer to that one's actually no.
Even
the
You're fine. You're fine.
No, you cannot get bots before the key. However, you should probably get the bots as soon as you start the key, at least the shock bots. Those are so important for damage right now.
MDT actually has all the shock bots labeled. You can actually just walk around in Mythic 0 and look at where they are as well. I would have signed all 5 shock bots immediately off the opener. There are some that are very easy to get. There are some that you probably need a rogue or a stealth class to be able to grab. But getting 5 shock bots immediately before you do anything in Junkyard is definitely profitable.
All right, and our final question here, healer question. This one's from Dragon. Healer question: should I be tracking my tank's class buffs? Trell, what do you want your healers to track of your tank kit?
Healers should first and foremost track your active mitigation. It's not so important for a class like Brewmaster, where you pretty much are always going to have Iron Skin up if you're playing well. But for other classes like Demon Hunter and Prot Warrior especially, and Prot Paladin actually, you got to see when they have Shield of the Righteous, Demon Spikes, or Shield Block up, because when they don't, they're going to get destroyed. And when they do, they're going to take little damage, so you don't need to burst healing into them.
One of the better healers that I play with actually tracks shield block charges too, so he knows when they're actually going to want Iron Bark.
I think that's extremely valuable, and I'm always impressed.
He also tracks Demo Shout on targets, which is maybe the most insignificant thing for most people, and it may be the biggest
DR?
rarity I've ever seen. Yeah, it's a 20% DR on all targets, but like that, I've never seen anybody else track Demo Shout on targets except for.
It's like, I'm always super impressed with healers like that, because they really know what they're doing and they know how their tank plays. And so you just feel more confident having them heal you, because they're going to know when you're going to take more damage. that's an extremely valuable skill set to have, and that's why I think everybody should multi-class and play all the roles in the game so they understand that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. A healer who has played some tank will have a much better understanding of like how it is that tank health bars move, and so that's
and vice versa. You should understand your healer as well. By the way.
Yeah, and tank should be tracking things that their healer like on their healer situation as well, so that they know, especially like if they have Ironbark available, is a pretty big thing. Anyways, that about does it for our episode here. We hope you guys have enjoyed this one. Let us know what you thought of this, like the episode in general, the idea of the episode. If you liked it, we can do this for other roles as well. If you disliked it and you'd rather have us do different episodes instead, also let us know that, and then we can do that too. So
we are open to any specific type of episode at this point. I think we're just kind of like,
if you have any negative feedback, feel free to Discord DM it to Tettles. If you have any positive feedback, go ahead and put that in an iTunes review for us. Okay, those are the 2 different folders for those types of things. So
holy shit, right?
If you have any random ideas, feel free to join the Discord and chat us up.
Yeah, definitely do that. Anyways, that's gonna be all for us. We'll be back next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right. Good show. Thanks, chat. What was the topic today? We talked about all the different tanks play styles. And that was
Still doing.
I don't know what he's doing, man. He's looking at his cat.
Oh, the cat.
Pog.
So sleepy.
He's just asleep on the back of the desk.
Yeah, he's just asleep behind my fucking monitor, dude. I don't know what he's doing. He's just hanging out here the whole entire time.
That's nice.
Lucas is just chilling on the couch. He's happy.
Oh, he's awake. Okay. Let's see who's streaming the video game. Do you guys want to go watch?
We can host Felinator, since we have been trashing Prop Valley.
Ooh, I do love. I do love hosting people after trashing their class. Yeah, that's
It's about how I describe that.
Yeah, that's definitely something I do. All right, what's he up to?
I think he's still a solely prop Paladin player, and he's really good at the class. So
yeah,
it should be good for people to be introduced.
All right, yeah, let's go do it. We go watch him. He's battling Rixa right now in a 21. Oh, he's playing with Evade and stuff in the morning.
Yeah, with Evade, and yeah.
Awesome. All right, gang, let's go watch. And yeah, we love Prop Valley. We love Prop Valley here. All right, bye everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.